Hello, this is DrPaulCottrell, and I'm going to be doing something a little bit different for this video. I'm going to read a section of the Torah dealing with the red heifer and give you my interpretation of it, all right? And it's going to be heavily influenced by Rashi's commentary about this parsha, this section. It's in Numbers, chapter 19. Okay, and we're going to start with verse 1. But before we start, please make sure you subscribe to all my channels. I have 3 channels on YouTube. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Please also follow me on X and GETTR. And please share the links and ask your social media to follow me. I need your help in terms of reaching a larger audience. We're going to be going through tumultuous times that I've been warning people about for several years about the crisis, but specifically what's going on in the Middle East. There's this dark cloud that started on 12/1/23. I was warning people about this when I was doing some videos with Gail back in September and August. All right. I've been also explaining my feelings as we move through this crisis in the Middle East with John Hogue. And I think we're going to be doing episode 11 or 12 tonight. So, stay tuned for that. So I'm not a newcomer to what's going on with the Middle East. All right. I've been, focused on it, especially since October 7th. But I've been warning people in September and August that there was this dark cloud that was happening to the world, but I had no idea that October 7th would be, a major inflection point. So with that said, let's do something different. Okay. This is going to be Numbers. Okay. Jews call it Bamidbar, but it's Numbers, and it's going to be chapter 19, and we're going to start with verse 1. Okay. I might be doing a few videos on this because there's some deep stuff in this. All right. Hashem spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, "This is the statute of the Torah which Hashem has commanded, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and they shall take to you a perfectly red cow, which has no blemish, upon which a yoke has not come." All right, so the no blemish means that it can't have more than 2 hairs that are not red. All right, and then no yoke, meaning the yoke around the neck, so it's never been a slave. Now that's important. Now think about the idea of being a slave and how that may affect you down the road if you become free. All right. So there's a deeper meaning to this. All right. You shall give it to Elazar the Cohen. All right. So you got to remember they were going to. This is during the tabernacle time period. Okay. So Elazar the Cohen, he shall take it to the outside of the camp. So it can't be within Jerusalem because now, they've already crossed the river and they're in Jerusalem, right? Yeah. Today, right? Back when this was written, they were in the desert. So outside the camp, and someone shall slaughter it in his presence. Okay. So it has to be a Cohen. And that Cohen doesn't necessarily slaughter the animal. Okay. For the red heifer. And someone shall slaughter in his presence. Okay. Now, when you look at the Hebrew in this, Rashi, okay, I'm reading the interpretation from Rashi. It's going to be, and someone literally means and he when you look at it in Hebrew. and someone, so it's and he, shall slaughter it in the presence. Okay, so that basically means that it's a non-Cohen may slaughter, and Elazar watches. So a Cohen has to watch, and this person that's doing the slaughtering doesn't have to be a Cohen. Before I read this more deeply, I thought it had to be a Cohen, but that's not the case. A Cohen has to watch, and someone pure has to do it. Okay, and think about the deepness of this. Perhaps there is a Cohen that isn't pure because they've been exposed to a dead corpse. All right, they wouldn't be able to do the slaughter. So this is like a safeguard to be able that it could be a Cohen that does the slaughtering, but doesn't have to be. All right. So Elazar, the Cohen, shall take some of its blood with his forefinger and sprinkle some of its blood toward the front of the tent of meeting 7 times. Okay. So by slaughtering the animal, it seems as though there is you have to be pure, right? And by slaughtering the animal, which is most likely on the north side of the altar, when slaughtering the animal, that individual that becomes impure. So this person who may not be a Cohen becomes impure, and the Cohen that takes the blood eventually becomes impure. All right, and the one that's watching is doing the spraying of the blood, all right, towards the tent of meeting. But this was back during the tabernacle days. This means that the blood will be sprinkled towards the Temple Mount. So the altar is outside the camp, outside, away from the temple area on Mount Olive in our day. All right. That altar, when the animal is sacrificed, most likely the animal will be sacrificed on the north side of the altar. That's my understanding. And that what will happen is then a Cohen, a different person that's watching this, will take the blood from the slaughter of the red heifer and sprinkle it towards the Temple Mount. Okay. So Elazar the Cohen shall take some of its blood with his forefinger and sprinkle some of its blood toward the front of the tent of meeting 7 times. So he's going to sprinkle towards the Temple Mount 7 times. Someone shall burn the cow before his eyes, its hide and its flesh and its blood with its waist shall he burn. Now, there's no interpretation by Rashi that if it's a different person or if it's the same person that's slaughtered. It seems to me that it's a different person. Okay. So you have the one that slaughters. You have a Cohen that's watching the slaughtering. The Cohen takes the blood from the slaughter, sprinkles it 7 times towards the Temple Mount. And then another person will take the animal and its hide. And my understanding, there's pieces of it that's cut up. All right. And it's put onto the altar by someone else. All right. Now, so someone shall burn the cow before his eyes. So in front of the Cohen. All right. Its hide and its flesh and its blood with its waist shall he burn. So everything. Okay. The Cohen shall take cedar wood. So now the Cohen is taking cedar wood and hyssop and a crimson tongue of wool, and he shall throw them into the burning of the cow. All right, so he's throwing cedar wood, the hyssop, and the crimson wool on the fire. Okay, so we've had 3 people that are involved in this right now. The Cohen shall, now this is where they're impure, and this is how they purify themselves. Okay, the Cohen shall immerse his clothing and immerse his flesh in water. So they're going into the mikvah. And afterwards he may enter into the camp, and the Cohen shall be impure until evening. So he goes into the mikvah, but he's not fully pure until evening. This makes it sound like the sacrifice has to be taking place in the morning or the mid-afternoon. Okay. The one who burns it shall immerse his clothing and immerse his flesh in water. Okay. So this is the person that put it up on the ark and was burning it. The one who burns it shall immerse his clothing and immerse his flesh in water. And he shall be impure until evening. Same issue with the Cohen. So the Cohen and the person that was doing the burning. Now, is it possible that the one that did the slaughter is the one that does the burning? That's possible. There's no commentary from Rashi about that. So do we have 2 people or do we have 3 people? Okay. Okay. The one who burns it shall immerse his clothing and immerse his flesh in water, and he shall be impure until evening. A pure man, okay, a pure man shall gather the ash of the cow and place it outside the camp. So this is where it's taking place. It's burning. It's going to take all night. So when this is done, someone is going up to collect the ash and take it and place it outside of where it was burned. So in this case, it would be Mount Olive. All right, they're taking the ash outside of Mount Olive. And a pure man. So 9 here, Rashi makes the comments, about and place it outside the camp. He would divide it into 3 parts. One part he would put on the Mount of Olive. I'm sorry. He phrases it as one part he put on Mount of Oil, which is also called Mount of Olives because the oil is coming from olives. And one part was divided among all the watches. And one part he put in a chal. Okay, no, what is that? I don't know what that is. Was the area, the chal was the area immediately outside the wall of the courtyard. Now the watches, the Kohen were divided into 24 family groups called watches. These watches officiated the Beis Mikdash, 1 watch per week according to a fixed rotation. So this is the Kohanim. So he would divide it into 3 parts. So So there's a lot going on in this one sentence. A pure man shall gather the ash of the cow and place it outside the camp in a pure place. It shall be for the assembly of Israel as a safekeeping. For water of sprinkling, it is a purifier. Okay. All right. So when you break that down, Rashi's commentary is that the place that's outside the camp, he would divide it into 3 parts. So he's taken the ash and dividing into 3 parts. I don't know if it's equally parted or not. Probably equally parted. One part he would put on Mount of Oil, which is interpreted as Mount Olive, because the olives create the oil. and one part was divided among all the watches. So there's 1/3 is given to all the Kohanim, and then one part he would put in the Chayil, and that is the area immediately outside the wall of the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash. This part of watches was kept outside the courtyard, and so that townspeople and all who needed to be purified should be taken from it. Okay, so it seems to me that the third that's going to the watches, it's interesting that they say watches and not watchers. I don't know why that is, but they 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 that is the amount that's going to purify the people. And and this part that was on Mount of Oil, Kohanim Gadolim, that's like the high Kohen, would sanctify themselves from it for performing the procedure of burning other red cows. So there's going to be the Mount of Oil or Mount Olive. That amount, that 1/3 amount, is going to Kohen Gadolim. Now, what about the Chayil? And this part that was in the Chayil was put there as a safekeeping by decree of Scripture. It shall be for the assembly of Israel as a safekeeping, probably because of as a backstop if the Kohen Gadol runs out of ash, or if the watches runs out of ash. So it's probably to save to it's a savings. Okay. So let's backtrack and go through what we just went through here. All right. In chapter 19, verse 1, we are talking about the red cow and that it has to be non-blemished and there's no yoke. Then there's the Cohen that will watch over a slaughter. Someone who doesn't have to be Cohen can slaughter the animal. Now, most likely, that person that's slaughtering the animal, I don't believe, my understanding is that they have to be away from a corpse. They've never been in front of a corpse before. I believe a human corpse. I'm not so sure about any other animal corpse. Now, okay, so you have the slaughtering that takes place most likely in the northern part of the altar. And then the blood is sprinkled 7 times towards the Temple Mount on Mount Olive. Or if you read the Hebrew directly, it's Mount of Oil. And then someone shall burn the cow before his eyes. Now, you can interpret that someone to be the same person that did the slaughtering or some other person. So are we dealing with 3 people or 2 people here? The Cohen that's watching the slaughterer. Now, is the person that's slaughtering, that doesn't have to be a Cohen, is he also burning the animal on the altar? Or is it a different person? The Cohen shall immerse his clothing. All right, so after the Cohen sees all this and does the sprinkling, he has to immerse his clothing, and he has to immerse in the mikvah, and he's not pure until nightfall. Same thing with the person that burned it. They don't say anything about the person that slaughtered. So the interpretation because of this is that most likely the person that slaughtered is the person that actually burned the animal. A pure man shall gather the ash. So they would, this interpretation here, a pure man could be a different person, or the two people or three people that participated in the ritual, because now they're purified. Remember, they're pure, they're impure until evening. So this thing's burning over a 24-hour period. The people that slaughtered, the people that burned, the people that watched, right? The person that watched, they are impure. They go into the mikvah with their clothing. You know, their clothing is immersed. Their body is immersed with nothing on them. They're in that mikvah, and then what happens is they'll become pure by nightfall. Okay? As this is happening, the cow is burning on the altar. All right? It becomes morning, and it's ash now. Okay? Now, a pure man, so it could be the people that went into the mikvah and became pure by nightfall, the same people, or it could be someone totally different. A pure man shall gather the ash of the cow and place it outside the camp, and it shall and place it outside the camp in a pure place. It shall be for the assembly of Israel as safekeeping, for water of sprinkling. It is a purifier. One who gathers the ash of the cow shall immerse his clothing and be impure until evening. Okay, so it's the same thing. Once you touch it, you become impure. Okay, so it's a pure thing. It's a thing that makes you pure, but in preparing this in its different facets, it makes you impure. And the places that it's going to be divided into three parts. It's going to be placed on Mount Olive. It's going to be given to the Cohens, and another third is going to be given to the head Cohen, the Kohanim Gedolim. The one who gathers the ash of the cow shall immerse his clothing and be impure until evening. It shall be for the children of Israel and for the convert who dwells among them as an eternal statute. Okay? And then if you touch, then it goes, and I'll do another video on this, but then it goes, if you touch a corpse, what you would do with the ash from the red heifer. Okay, so let's step back, and what did we learn from this? There seems to be minimum 2 people involved. All right? You have someone that is overseeing, watching, that's a Cohen. And you have someone that could be a Cohen or a non-Cohen that is actually slaughtering the animal. Most likely, both of these people would not have been by a dead corpse, because we don't have any ash to purify them before the slaughtering of the red cow. See, back in the olden days, they had a little bit of ash from a previous red cow. They'd purify the Cohen or whoever was going to be doing the slaughtering, and then they're okay, and then they can do the purification. We don't have that anymore. So we're starting from ground zero. We're starting baseline again. Well, to do baseline, you have to find someone that has never been by a corpse. So it looks like either 2 or 3 people that's never been by a corpse. And at least one of them seems to need to be a Cohen. All right. But because he's not doing the slaughtering, he's only touching the blood, I'm not sure if he actually has to be pure or not. I'm not sure. It's left for interpretation there. All right. And this is just what's in the Torah. This is not the oral tradition part of it. And I don't know where to find that in the Talmud. All right. I'm sure it's written somewhere. I just don't know what tractate it's in, because there's many tractates, and it would be difficult to find it without doing, extensive research on this. But so you have a Cohen, you have a slaughterer, and you have someone that is burning. and you have someone that is picking up the ash. At minimum, it looks like two people. All right. Max, you might even have as many as four. All right. So you do this, you do the slaughter. The Cohen is watching. The slaughterer is either a Cohen or it doesn't have to be a Cohen. And the sprinkling of the blood 7 times towards the base of Mikdash, towards the Temple Mount. This is all happening on Mount Olive or Mount Oil. And when this happens, then a person, maybe the slaughterer, maybe a different person, puts the cow up on the altar and it's starting to burn. Then the Cohen that was observing puts cedar wood, the crimson wool, and the hyssop, on the fire. Now, the Cohen and the ones that were involved in the burning have to immerse. It doesn't state that the person that did the slaughtering has to immerse. So it gives you the interpretation that the person that actually did slaughtering is most likely the same person that actually burned the cow on the altar. So in that interpretation, it's two people. Okay. Now they immerse in the mikvah, their clothing and their naked body, and then they're impure until nightfall. The cow is burning overnight, and in the morning or in the mid-afternoon, when it's all ash, right? Someone that's pure, which could be these two individuals or someone else, goes up and ends up collecting the ash. And there's going to be, this ash is going to be divided into 3 parts. One part is going to the Kohanim Gedolim. Another part is going to the watches, which are the Cohen, the families that will be part of the temple and for the temple service. And then another part will be for safekeeping, that will be on the side of the base of Mikdash. All right. So this is going to be by the Temple Mount in our day. All right. So, and then once that person collects that ash, they have to immerse in the mikvah, wait until nightfall, and then they're pure again. All right. So that's what's going to have to transpire. Now, what do we know right now? There were 5 cows that were transported from Texas to the West Bank. All right. There is an organization called Temple Institute that has been making the certain vessels. I don't know which vessels they've made. I've heard that they've made 70 vessels for the temple. And they are the ones that are taking care of the animals and making sure that they stay kosher. All right. And so they're under like 24-hour surveillance, right? These cows are really important. Right? So there are 5. My understanding is that out of the 5, one of them became not kosher because it has more than 2 hairs that are not red. So 4 are still, as of like a couple days ago, 4 are still good. All right. The slaughtering has to take place, and it doesn't state in this parsha, but the slaughtering from the oral traditions, it has to be in between 3 to 5 years. All right. But the longer you wait, the more chance of you having a problem. Since we don't have any ash, I think that they're going to try to minimize the amount of time that they're going to allow to elapse before they slaughter the animals. So it's got to be soon. Now, when can they do this? Well, they can do it right now, all the way, probably into the beginning of 2025. But there are some like key points here. Last year on Simchas Torah, there was the attack, but we couldn't blow the shofar during Rosh Hashanah last year on the first day because it was on the Shabbos. So this year we can blow the shofar. So there's going to be special strength this year, especially if you do the slaughtering right before Rosh Hashanah. Well, that's before October 3rd. There's also, the benefit of slaughtering the animals before Passover, because you don't have to wait until October, because all 4 of them may become unkosher by then. So maybe at least one would have to be slaughtered before that time, and an opportune time would be right before Passover. Now, after Passover, there's the counting of the Omer, which is, a 50-day count. So this count, I don't know if you can slaughter the cow during the Omer. Now, maybe you can, but I don't know if you can. I don't know. It just seems that it's better off to either slaughter it after the 50-day count for the Omer than during. But you might be able to, and maybe there's some Kabbalistic reason why it should be. So I am seeing this, and I'm not a Torah scholar by any means, but I know a little bit, all right? It seems to me that it's going to be happening before Passover, so before April 22nd. Or if there's some Kabbalistic reason that I don't know on why it should be slaughtered during the Omer, it would be after Passover during the 50-day count. Or it would be slaughtered before Rosh Hashanah, which would be before October 3rd. Now, there are 4 animals, so maybe they'll do this in piecemeal. In addition, they haven't slaughtered a red heifer in a long, long, long time, over 2,000 years, all right? So there's some nuance that we didn't even cover, that these people that are going to be participating, these 2 people or 3 people or 4 people, whoever, and then the watches and the Kohen named Gedolim, the Kohen named Gedolim, all of these people have to learn what they have to do, because this hasn't been in place for the last 2,000 years. So there may be a simulation run that's taking place, right? Because if this person you have to remember, they have to slaughter the animal perfectly. It can't have the intent of the slaughterer has to be correct in their mind, and the way they cut the trachea and the esophagus has to be in a perfect way. Because if it's not, then it's invalid sacrifice. So the person that's slaughtering, my understanding, is going to be young. It's about 15-year-old that falls into this category where they weren't by a dead body, all right? So now maybe this person isn't going to be doing the slaughtering. Maybe he'll be collecting the ash. Like I said, there's 4 people, so or 4 or 2 people. I'm not sure. It depends on the interpretation. Minimum maybe 2, maximum maybe 4. So maybe there's a leeway. But there's going to be a group of people that have to practice what they need to do when, and it has to be all perfect, or we got a problem. So they're probably going to slaughter, or at least try to slaughter, 1 animal and not all the animals at the same time, just in case they make a mistake. All right. Then this ash is collected, and then it's going to be distributed, and it's going to be waiting for this is going to start the countdown for the Temple Mount to be rebuilt. All right. Some other things have to happen that are Messianic in a way, but this starts it. All right. So you have the ash that's going to be put for safekeeping, and then you're going to have ash that's given to the Kohen Gedolim, and then you're going to have ash that's given to the watches, and the watches are the Kohen that will be purifying the people, right? The Jewish people. Now, once that all happens, and the Kohen Gedolim, I believe, uses their ash to actually purify the actual objects that'll be going into the temple. All right. Now, and themselves as they're doing their service in the Holy of Holies. So this is, a larger orchestrated thing. It's not just slaughtering the animal and just burning the ash. There's a lot more going on, a lot more, with the dividing of the parts. And I'm willing to bet that you've never heard this before about the dividing of the parts and all that, because it's not written in. It's part of the oral tradition and in reading the meaning of the Hebrew words in a certain way based on the commentary of Rashi. All right. So, so there's a lot of nuance, and we didn't even dive into like the other oral tradition of what was going on with the red cow that's in the Talmud. I don't know. I never read it. I don't know where to even look, but there's more to it. All right. There is also a Kabbalistic thing that's going on with the eclipse. All right. Back in early time, all right, Kabbalistically, the sun and the moon were equal in power. What they mean, spiritual power. But over time, the moon is diminished. Now, the moon represents, depending on the context, the moon represents basically the Jewish people, and the sun represents the rest of the people. But in the Zohar, it also talks about the sun and the moon, and Moses actually represents the sun, and the moon represents Joshua. So it depends on the context you're looking at. But if you're looking at the Jewish people compared to non-Jewish people, the sun is more powerful than the moon, and the moon represents the Jewish people. But when you have the eclipse, there's actually a negation of the sun, and at one instant, the moon is very powerful. All right. And then as the eclipse starts to abate, then the moon starts to lose its power. All right. So from a Kabbalistic point of view, there's a moment in time where the moon is actually more powerful than the sun at that perfect eclipse point. Now, this is not, my understanding, it's not a perfect eclipse because there's a little bit of a ring of the sun. But the moon is going to be much more powerful at an instant than usually in relative terms to the sun. And this goes back to this ebb and flow between Esau and Jacob and their soul roots. So the soul root of Jacob with the sun on April 8th is going to be strong. There is a case Kabbalistically to slaughter the animals during that time period, because that's the strengthening of the moon, the strengthening of the Jewish people, the soul root of Jacob, and the weakening of the other side, which is the soul root of Esau. All right. So it could happen on Monday. There is a case, but for them to be able to slaughter the animal and do all this exactly at the moment of the eclipse, and no one has done this since 2,000 years, it's adding to chance of failure, adding to the probability that there may be some mistake that's happened and this cow is no longer valid. All right. Because you can have a pure cow, but if the process, something happens, it can invalidate the whole service and everything has to, start over with another cow. So it has to be perfect. So would they try to time it perfectly with the eclipse? I don't think so. And not only that, we have to go back to, this eclipse, when is it? Is it during the day? Then it's more near the more nighttime in Israel. It's supposed to be slaughtered in the morning or early afternoon, so the Cohen and the ones that participated are immersed in the mikvah, and then at nightfall they become pure. They're not going to slaughter it at night. So, so there's some timing issues because of immersion in the mikvah. All right. So the chances of it getting right at the exact moment for the eclipse, right, as it's coming across the United States and it crosses over Texas, which is interesting. Um, it, you know, they probably can't time it exact. Now they may say because it's an eclipse, we're going to do it in the morning um, in Israel. My understanding is that's before the eclipse. They might do it, but I don't think they can do it exactly on the eclipse. That point where the moon is right in front of the sun, right? That I don't think that's possible. So I think it causes a bunch of complications in terms of timing, in terms of mikvah immersion, all this stuff. So it's possible that they do it on the day of the eclipse, but not on the exact moment of the eclipse. I think it's more probable that it's going to be before April 22nd, not on the eclipse, and that the eclipse is kind of like a signal to do it. But who knows? Now, I remember reading a passage in the Zohar, and there is a longer passage in the Zohar about the red heifer, but I read about a sign in the sky that lasted for, I think, 70 days. Now this eclipse isn't lasting for 70 days, and it was supposed to be over Rome, not over Texas. So I mean, there's that doesn't even kind of fit, right? So that was that countdown, that 70-day countdown was the actual countdown for the Messianic era to literally start, or that's happened. But what I do know is that if the cows are slaughtered and everything is properly done and there's the ash that's distributed, that is the countdown for the Temple Mount to be rebuilt. Now, it doesn't mean that it's going to be rebuilt in 15 days. It doesn't mean that it's going to be, built in 15 years. We don't know. But there's these things that are happening that are going to be life-changing, societal changing. And I'm concerned that there are going to be the rabbinical class that is afraid to do this. And if they're afraid to do this, then there will be a heavy curse on Israel. And there is this battle that's happening. There is the power of Satan that's losing power, and the power of good is starting to increase. But as the power of Satan and that right is losing, it's going to start kicking and screaming and doing things as it's losing power. And as the good is rising, the individuals that are part of the good side may be afraid because of this evil inclination that takes place. There's a fear that sets in the rabbinical class about afraid of doing this, because many rabbinical people are pacifists. All right. But you can see in society there are many people that are pacifists, and they aren't rabbinical or clerical. They're not part of the clergy. So I would, I'm just concerned that there's going to be a path that the rabbinical class will have a pacifist footing and miss the opportunity, and all 5 cows end up becoming impure because they were waiting. And there are sections of the Torah that state, sometimes you just have to do and stop praying. And I think the rabbinical class needs to really take that home and focus on doing and not, praying so much. what was the lesson learned from this? Well, you can't just be a keyboard warrior. You have to engage. You can't just pray. Can't just pray and think that everything's going to be, great. You have to be engaged in and do positive social change. And you can't just keyboard warrior. Can't be just a keyboard warrior. You have to be an engaged citizen. You have to do positive social change, right? And this is why I keep on saying that talk is great, but at least the crisis that we went through in 2020, all the way through the aftershock of the crisis, disinformation, this keyboard warring type stuff that was going on in 2020 didn't stop it. It didn't get to the root cause, and we still had the problem. So the informational war didn't work. It informed people, but it didn't stop anything. It didn't get to the root cause. And you got a lot of people that monetized it, and they don't really care. There are many people that need war and destruction and this never-ending, keyboard warring, thinking, oh, did you see that, conspiracy theory, blah, blah, blah. Get to the root cause, solve the problem, and make the channels obsolete. If you do your job, and I'm talking to the people that publish a lot, on channels and stuff like that made this into a cottage industry. If you're going to do something that's actually going to save society properly, it means that you become obsolete if you do it correctly. Similar to a nonprofit. If you want to solve world hunger, your mission should be solving world hunger, and you are obsolete. You no longer have the nonprofit. What happens is that it becomes institutionalized. So InfoWar becomes institutionalized. Keyboard warring becomes institutionalized. Overproduction of chaos and destruction becomes institutionalized. And you don't get to the root problem. We did not shut down the laboratories doing nefarious things. Therefore, there are going to be things that happen in the future that we wish never happened, that would never have happened if we paid attention to people like myself and warned the public, shut down the damn labs. Now, people would say, what are you doing, Dr. Paul Cottrell? Why aren't you shutting down the lab? You know what? It takes a whole community, not any one individual. And this is the problem. You're in this whole info war, keyboard warring kind of world that we're living in. Everyone's behind the screen wanting to do something, but no one does it. No one galvanizes a group of people and forces the government to shut down the labs, forces the government to tear down the national security state. People aren't willing to galvanize. So what you'll have is martyrs out there that destroy their career or their reputation, trying to do the right thing for mankind. But the keyboard warriors, they don't do anything. They just sit on their fat ass and watch football or monetize a crisis. See, the problem here is you get to the root cause and you no longer have the problem. But what you have is people like Alex Jones and many others that they get wealthy based on this crisis. Why would they want to solve the problem? They're wealthy from it. But people buy into it. People buy into it. There's the problem. So we go through this purification process with the red heifer to try to reboot the temple and get mankind more spiritual and more more in tune with God and make the world a better place, right? But what you have is a group of people out there that are trying to demonize what actually is happening. They're trying to demonize the rebooting of the temple. They're trying to demonize the red heifer sacrifices. They're trying to demonize the actual rebooting and the ushering in of a Messianic era, where there's peace on this earth and prosperity for everybody. So, pay attention. If you are giving money to a nonprofit, all right, and their mission isn't to become obsolete, you're giving to the wrong nonprofit. If you're supporting someone that doesn't trying to solve problems, you're supporting the wrong person. You know, never any. Alex Jones has had 30 years of trying to solve the New World Order problem and hasn't. He's got super wealthy on it, especially in the last 10 years. I mean, you know, the last 10 years, that boy was making 20 to 40 million dollars in sales. All right. That's a lot of money. So, you know, let's just say for ease, you know, it's 30 million and, you know, for 10 years, that's $300 million worth of revenue. And he hasn't solved the New World Order problem. You know what? He's part of the problem. He is part of the problem. So that's my take on it. Support people that have solutions to try to help with improving your immune system and your body and your mental health and your spirituality. And stop supporting people that are trying to connect all dots. All dots don't connect. Don't, don't think that everything is a David Icke situation. But there are things that are happening in the world that are going to be societal changing. And depending on how we align ourselves, are we aligning ourselves with the soul root of Esau or the soul root of Jacob? Depends on how you're gonna fall into the curse of the blessing. Now it's up to you. But I'm not wrong on this. You know, I just don't know how long this is, what's the arc of time this is all going to play out. But I do know that, it's been over 2,000 years since mankind has had an opportunity where there's going to actually be the potentiality of the slaughtering of these red heifers, or at least one of them. And, we have a society that is afraid. Netanyahu's afraid to get the job done. The American, in terms of the war in the Middle East, the American public is afraid of getting the job done. See, the rabbinical class that's governing all this, and orchestrating all the sacrifices for the red heifers, they're afraid. They're afraid they'll screw up. They're afraid that this may create instability in the world, which it probably will in the short term. But the thing is that God told people, don't be afraid, just do and follow, and you'll be fine. It's when you get afraid and you don't do where you start getting into problems. So Netanyahu is getting a lot of pressure from the United States on the way he's conducting the war, and it's looking like he's backtracking. Well, that's going to be a problem for Israel in the long term. That's kicking the can down the road for some sort of political expedience in the United States. So Americans are afraid. You just take a look at just the way the Pentagon is. They talk about how great the military is, but they can't win a war. Or how America's so great, but there's a lot of people suffering in terms of economics. There's too many people passive and not willing to engage and solve the problem and get it done. There's, it's a small percentage of the population up there. So there's lots of keyboard warriors, lots of truthers that think they know everything, but they don't solve the problem. Solve the problem, become obsolete. You want to listen to people that actually literally no longer want to publish because the problem is solved and you don't have to deal with it anymore. We have the after effect of the crisis in 2020 through turbo cancers and all these other syndromes, long hauler, and all this stuff, right? AIDS-like syndrome, autoimmune diseases, because we didn't solve the problem. We didn't solve the problem. We should have knocked down the labs, stopped this crazy research, this gain of function research that can be weaponized. And the ones that do it, they're held accountable and hang from a tree. But, we didn't do that. We just keyboard worrying. We're only worried about, XYZ. We're only worried about, well, was it the inoculation? Maybe it was the mandates, blah, blah, blah. Well, actually, it was both. It was the forced mandates and the little thing that was floating in the air. Didn't solve the problem. So now we have the aftershock of it. The same thing with the Middle East. Don't solve the problem, there will be an aftershock. It'll be worse. You miss the opportunity for the red heifers and the rebuilding of the temple. Same thing. It's going to get worse in the long run. And Esau's soul root will strengthen. And believe me, you don't want that. So thank you for listening and have a nice day.